Thanks everybody for joining from WeHi, and I think there are some external as well joining this presentation. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, here in Parkville, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, but also acknowledging any First Nation, the First Nation on the lands of which you are joining us today, if it's not Parkville or Melbourne. And I would like to also pay my respects to elders past and present and leaders of the First Nations that would be joining us today. It's a great pleasure to welcome Professor Michael Wallach to the Institute. I think we are really looking forward to learn more about Spark, and that's an initiative that I've heard about, or at least the name, a while ago, because a few years ago I bought a book about the Spark example from the US and was really interested in that. And through the discussion we'll have today, you'll see that that's a concept that we're really interested in, both from an enabling but also investment perspective. Michael comes from the US. He's been trained at the University of Michigan and also Hebrew University of Jerusalem, where he obtained his PhD. He has developed vaccines that have now been approved. He was appointed inaugural director of the Institute of the Biotechnology Infectious Disease at UTS in Sydney in 2002 and stayed there since. And also a joint professor at the Technion Israel Faculty of Biotechnology. He was appointed as director of Spark Sydney program in 2014, which included a number of organizations and has since, like UTS, University of Sydney, and Macquarie University. And also in 2018 was appointed general director of Spark Oceania. So as you will hear, and really as what the main interest is really, this program is really designed to help researchers to bring ideas from a concept to the clinic. So I think that's really something that we are really interested in learning about and sharing our own experience with this as well. Other Australian universities and organizations have joined this program as well, including University of Melbourne, Monash, etc. Michael also runs entrepreneurship courses and programs across various organizations. Again, something that's of interest to us. And really shares a commitment in helping researchers really translating their ideas into a therapeutic impact. So we really welcome you to the Institute and looking forward to the presentation and conversations with you. Thank you.
Thank you. So first of all, there's no PowerPoint presentation, so you don't have to look at that. I want to thank Pramila for making this arrangement for me to come. It happened totally by chance. I happened to say last night I had a wedding in Melbourne. Why don't I visit WeHi? To see how things are going and to see where you're at in terms of translation and commercialization of your research. That was a great introduction of my background. I was going to start out with that. Let me just add a few things about myself and where I'm coming from. So I guess growing up in New York, which, as I say, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. You may know the song. And also having lived in Israel for many years, around 25, and still have a presence there and children there. I'm an entrepreneurial person by nature. And for me, doing research that's not going to lead to some benefit to a patient doesn't really interest me that much. It was from the day that I started my PhD in Jerusalem that I remember my supervisor saying, "Why do you do research?" And I said, "Because I want to help patients." And he said, "You may be disappointed because it's very difficult to help patients through our research." And what's become apparent in coming to Australia as the inaugural director of an institute is it's even harder here. It's much harder here. In Israel, I think the amount of venture capital for early stage research and commercialization is about 100-fold greater than Australia per capita. Even my son-in-law, and in Israel, kids, my grandson is thinking of creating a startup at age 11. It's in the blood of Israelis to think, and New Yorkers to some extent, that you make your own fate. You don't wait for someone to, tell you what to do. You want to be a postdoc, you want to be a PhD student, to just do what your supervisor does. That's great. That's great for training, but it's not good enough. And the future right now, as uncertain it is, I guess my message to begin with is, will depend largely on our ability to take research from a place like Weihai and do something with it. Australia's in this terrible position in terms of entrepreneurship. And on top of that, many of our institutions, including UTS, and you, as we're seeing in others, face terrible financial difficulties. I understand here there's some financial difficulty as well. As I said just this morning to Pramila, you face financial difficulties by looking for ways to cut, but also for ways to make money. Because if you don't do both, you're just going to go backwards. And in fact, reading the press more and more over the past few months and years, the universities themselves face existential threat due to the cost of education. The government doesn't want to pay for it, and its very survival may depend on its ability to start changing. And I'm here with that message. And in fact, I go around the world with that message. And as I also said earlier this morning, I often say to leading managers of major organizations who ask for my advice, I say, you have to make a change. You can't have people like Lawrence Moore spending all this time teaching international students or whoever you're teaching. And I'll introduce him in a moment, who's my colleague at Monash. You have to spend time in the lab. Too many of our professors are sitting in their offices and don't even know what's happening in their own labs. And not mentioning any names, but I think that's a big problem. So let me just get this back. Yep. So let me start from the fact that after my own life experience of taking a research project from the bench to the market, in the case it was for chickens, which doesn't sound very exciting, but it was very exciting. And going through that experience and working for 9.5 years at Teva Pharmaceuticals in Israel. And as I was saying to Jenny, I learned a lot working at Teva. It took me a year just to prove my vaccine was sterile. A year of my life was dedicated to proving a vaccine is sterile. How boring that can be. And what I did learn from that, as also I'll discuss in a bit, is the importance of validation. Our academic life does not allow for validation. Doesn't even know what validation means. In fact, in one talk I gave at University of Sydney on GLP, one of the researchers said, what, do I really have to do all of that? Who's going to tell me to do that? And I said, well, if your research isn't validated, and as we've seen in the past with discoveries that came out of CSIRO, if they're irreproducible, that not only damages you, it damages the whole organization. Now, this talk, as I said, as I want to say, I'm not talking to you, I'm actually talking with you, because I imagine many of you are feeling these same things. I know young people like yourselves in the back and the young people in the front are feeling uncertainty and what am I going to do? 91 academics were just fired from one of our universities in Wollongong, and there's going to be a flood of academics on the market looking for jobs. At the same time, and also, which has surprised me, I've been going around in Australia because I was asked to play a role in the establishment of the Sydney Science Park in Western Sydney, which is a multi-billion-dollar investment. These precincts are going up all over the place. At Westmead, at ANU, at UNSW, in Adelaide, everywhere, these parks are going up. So what are they going up for? No one's going to do startups and no one's going to create new drugs and new opportunities. As tough as it is. The other thing I learned from my own life story is just how difficult it is to translate research. You can't sit in your lab in this beautiful institution and translate research. You have to go out in the world. You have to go to conferences where there are VCs, where I was just at one in Stanford, and pitch and pitch and knock and never give up. Never give up. And if you believe in something, you have to take it all the way. You have to have that feeling. It will be a wonderful publication. You may win a grant, but it's not going to do anything in terms of creating new drugs or new medical devices for patients. So it's been a tough journey for me. It took me 18 years from the time I discovered the protein that was needed in my vaccine in 1984 until it was launched by Teva in 2002. I was 12 at the time when I started, in case you're wondering my age. Please laugh at my jokes. It's very important. So what I did, and this is sort of a story form of what I'm telling you, is in about 2007, I was approached by the vice president of Technion Israel, and he said to me, "We'd really like you to come to Technion and teach something, teach anything you want." By the way, the same thing with the Institute when I came to UTS. They said, "We'll give you X million dollars, do whatever you want." I asked the deputy vice chancellor, "Can I invest it in horse races and just go and gamble it?" She said, "Fine, as long as you bring back, if we give you 5 million, bring back 20, we're happy." Right? I mean, that was strange. So I thought about that, and I sort of recreated my life journey in a course that I called Bioinnovation Entrepreneurship, which is a course that's devoted to try to get people to understand, not only from an educational point of view, what's the journey going from a discovery made in the lab at Wehi to actually getting into a clinical trial, but to understand it experientially. Because I can talk to you about regulatory and IP and all those things. I can show you beautiful slides, but it won't mean anything unless you do it. And the only way to do it is to take that risk. Because if you're just going to sit back and wait for your Nature paper and then think that that Nature paper is going to get me an NHMRC grant and that's my life, it's not such an attractive life. In fact, one of the professors I just met at the University of Adelaide doing my course, he was the only one in the audience who had a permanent position at Adelaide. And he announced to the audience, "By the way, it's not so great. I'm not really happy." Because what's happening in the universities is the stress and pressure from having to teach so much, attend meetings, endless meetings. I spent an hour meeting with all the senior academics in my department on the wording of a form for getting back money for sandwiches. The vice chancellor wrote to me, "Why did I buy that sandwich when I was at a certain airport?" I mean, the waste of time, the waste of energy. Grants we write endlessly with a 10 or 7% success rate, and for early careers, it's lower. So we're writing grant after grant after grant. We're spending enormous amounts of time and not going forward. So the bioinnovation course was developed to teach people how to ideate better, how to understand what the problem is they're trying to solve, which is another big issue that Pramila, I think, witnessed at University of Melbourne when I asked a group of senior people there, "What's the problem you're trying to solve?" It's often the case that they've lost touch with it. And the solution is the only thing they're thinking about because that's going to lead to a paper. And the same thing, if you ask someone, you're developing an end product, say a drug, what's it going to cost? When I asked a researcher that question, what will it cost? They thought that was the most ridiculous question, never thought about it. And Lawrence, for example, teaches a lot about reimbursement. They don't even know what it is. So the purpose of the course that we call Bioinnovation Entrepreneurship is to get the participants, and now originally it's for mainly PhD students. I've also had senior professors join the course all over the world. In fact, this year we're running the course ran it in Johannesburg, at UTS, in Birmingham, UK, Kyoto, Japan. So everyone wants this sort of thing, and I understand also it's of interest to you here at Wehi, so that we can stimulate, particularly younger people, to start thinking in a new way. Because again, if they don't, we're just going to go backwards, the way I see things. Except for Monash, they're in the black. But everyone else seems to be in the red. So the course in its original form ran for 2 weeks, daily for from 9 to 5, and sometimes often participants stayed later. during which time they come up with their own ideas to develop new products and defining what that product is in terms of intellectual property, in terms of regulatory, clinical trials, et cetera. And they go through that whole process. At the end, they give a pitch. And in the first few years I ran it, it's often the case that that pitch, if it used in some competition that took place at UTS, they'd often win the award. And they've only been doing it for 2 weeks because they can connect the whole process and present it in a coherent way. And it's a very different type of presentation than a typical talk you give at a conference in your particular area of expertise. So that course has been running since 2007. It's been run a total of about 40 times already, all over the world, and has been extremely successful in terms of educating a lot of people. And every single participant comes up with a good idea, often ones that are absolutely amazing. Some of them have won prizes, as I said, et cetera. So that is where I was coming from and started this program, as I said, at Technion, when a group of people from Technion went out to the US to try to improve the level of and improve tech transfer at Technion, where Technion, in its present state at that time, was the leading university in the world in terms of tech transfer. And in fact, one of their products that they were involved in was Copaxone, developed at Teva, which was $1 billion drug. When they went out in the world, they visited the typical places, Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Wisconsin, and one or two others. And for some reason, one of the people who participated in that trip mentioned my course at Technion, and both Harvard and Stanford were interested in the course. And that started this relationship with Stanford. Maybe for Lawrence, some of this is new, I don't know. But we were together at Harvard, and you saw they were interested in the course there. So the first year that I started working with Stanford, I was invited there to help with their current teaching practices and give advice. And then I heard about Spark. And it had started, I think, maybe 5 years prior to my arrival, and it was already doing amazingly well at Stanford. That success was measured at that time in 3 ways, which was entry into clinical trials, creation of startups, or license. And their success rate was around 60%. 60%. The best VCs in the world maybe are at 4 or 5% success. So that was amazing, amazing. And they did it through a relatively simple process, which the president of Spark Global, Daria Moshli-Rosen, and Kevin Grimes at Stanford, did it mainly by bringing in industry mentors. That was the real key. And when Stanford opened the door to the industry, they came. In fact, they had the opposite problem. At the beginning, there were about 20 people in the room, several from industry, people from FDA, people from all the aspects of the translational pathway for drug discovery were in the same room. And as a result, researchers started producing amazing results, as I say. And licenses started to become very commonplace. And on top of that, and unexpectedly, the grant success rate went up. And actually, they estimated back when that for every $1 invested, they'd get $8 in return in terms of just grant success rate. And that's been happening now, by the way, at the University of Sydney, where we've been running the program for the past now 10 years or so. The grant success rate went up. And it appears that NIH and MRC appreciate seeing that they were part of Spark. NIH started appreciating seeing Stanford scientists part of Spark as well. So again, the key to success from the start was they brought the industry people in. And of course, you're in Palo Alto and the industry people are around you. The VCs are down the block. and they were all in the room, and they would meet weekly, as Pramila knows. They'd meet with the researchers weekly, and the sessions would include sessions for mentoring, for education, for updates, etc. And they were tough sessions. I attended a number of them. When a researcher would get up and present to this group, as happened when I was at Teva, by the way, the same sort of thing, you get challenged. And you have to stand up to a very tough audience. And you're asked questions that you're not normally asked. And sometimes when I go back and forth between Israel or New York or here, people would be offended by me asking questions that students feel are unfair. But if you're not asked those questions, and if you're not tested, you're not going to be able to stand up to the international market, call it, for finding funding. So that was a big part of it. The other big part of it, as you mentioned, was the book they wrote, the emphasis on defining starting with the end in mind, of clearly understanding what a target product profile is for a drug from day one, so you clearly understand where you're going and where you're coming from and what your problem is and how you're going to get through this whole path and how you're going to get through the valley of death between the time that you do research and the time an industry partner will want to take it up. And taking it up doesn't just mean giving you a bit of money. It means taking it up. It means when I worked at Teva, they looked at my project as a $100 million investment. They didn't look at it as the first year or 3 years of research. They looked at it from day one as a $100 million investment. And that was for chickens, right? That was a vaccine for chickens for a disease called coccidiosis. Similarly, with human drugs and new vaccines, we're talking much bigger numbers. So they're not going to start Pfizer's not going to start a project to just fund research for a few years. They're going to start it with intending to finish it. And finishing it today means roughly $1 billion, if not more. I understand there's a new fund here created, the 6610, which is wonderful, but compared to the cost of developing new drugs, it's minimal. It will get you to a stage that maybe you can get through, if you're lucky, at phase 1. And attracting industry funding after phase 1 is not easy today, because you're out there competing with the folks from MIT and Harvard and everywhere else. So it's a big question around, okay, how are we going to do this? And Spark is there to help fill that gap. We worked hard when we were at the University of Melbourne with Pramila and with Lawrence, of course, who I'll introduce in a second, and he can talk about his experiences. We worked really hard to find mentors locally that can be as good as Stanford mentors. And you can argue, well, this is Stanford, right? Now, obviously, it's going to be successful. You have everything you need right there. But we found excellent mentors right here. I don't think there's a problem of mentorship. You have CSL now down the road, and you're partners with CSL. You have people right on the same street. So this was not a problem. I don't even think money necessarily is the big problem. The problem, the way I see it here, is culture. The problem here is fear of failure. And I'll say that very directly. The problem is if I don't teach God knows how many hours, and if I don't write God knows how many grants, and if I don't publish God knows so many papers, I'm not going to survive. That's the problem. Because if you're writing and doing research for papers, it's very different from doing research for a product. And you don't file a patent because you want to publish a paper. You file a patent because you want to make a product. And you agree. I see you're shaking your head a lot, so that's good. I'll keep going until you stop. These are the messages I go around the world trying to tell everyone. You have to change your culture. Australia has to change now. There is no more time. You want to do Spark, as I said this morning, you got to do it now. And I'm not doing this for me. And I should state very clearly, Spark does not take any ownership of your IP. I also do not come, nor does Lawrence, to you to tell you what to do. We give advice, we try to persuade, we try to get you to meet a lot, we bring mentors, but we don't force anything. Nor do we ask for, what we do ask for is a relatively small amount of payment for our time, some seed funding for the projects, and time from some of your people who eventually need to become the director or the local director here at WeHi. Now, and I know I'm not going in any particular order, but I'll give a bit more information on details of the program. The best combination of directors for the program is one basic researcher, academic, not from tech transfer, but an academic, and a clinician. That is, to me, the ideal directorship. And those two people are going to have to be very kind and very altruistic, because they're not doing it for themselves. They're doing it for the institution. I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing it for the institution. I'm doing it for seeing this amazing research at WeHi not getting out enough into the hospital. Am I running out of battery? Okay. And so the program is basically, again, there to help and there to serve you. Once it's clear, and we'll have meetings today, what the needs are, then the program can be designed to particularly fit what's needed in a particular organization. And to work together with professional staff and everyone else to make it happen and to be a benefit to you, not to be a major cost. The seed funding given by most Australian institutes have been in the range of 20 to 50K per year, which is seed funding. It's meant to be milestone based. Obviously, it's somewhat symbolic. I know the Weizmann Institute, when I was there in Israel visiting and we're doing Spark, they were giving $1 million a project, which isn't really what Spark normally does, but that's another possibility if you really wanted to go that way. The idea of Spark is not to become a grant funding body, but to become a seed funding body that will further push things and spark things forward. Because again, I think the problem isn't the money. I think the problem is the culture. We got to get off of this publish and perish thing. Otherwise, and I know it's a risk, particularly for you guys. But if all you do is publish or perish for the next 50 years of your life, how exciting is that anyway? If you ask me, it's not very great. You have to get out, we have to get out of this cycle. And that's through creating startups that are going to be successful. It's going to create jobs. It's going to create opportunities. It's going to make all these health precincts have a purpose. At the same time, if you're particularly successful and can do both, and you work 24/7, if that's what you want to do, you can keep both jobs. But if the university is going to keep forcing everyone to teach endlessly, it's going to be tough, is my feeling. And I know it's happening at UTS. And once you start going backwards on the research side, it's hard to get back in the game. So you have to keep up research. What else I want to tell you is the mentors that we chose here in Melbourne, we also, and this is a very important aspect, we also have access to international mentors, including those from Stanford. Australia is part of Spark Global, and I actually can say at the first meeting in Taiwan that I played an important role of initiating. That has started a process that now Spark Global has 63 institutions or more in Spark Global and gives you access to the world, essentially. And they are all over the world. And it's often the best universities. It's Stanford in the US, it's University of Helsinki, it's University of Tokyo. It's always the top institution in that country. It wasn't meant to be that way, but that's how it's turned out. As far as we're concerned in Spark, any institution can join. And here it's been University of Sydney, Monash, and Melbourne, and Macquarie and UTS. So that's unintentional. Anyone should be able to join. Joining itself involves, speak from a Stanford point of view, they want each organization to sign a charter. For Monash, that was a problem. Maybe a problem here, I don't know. The charter is meant to be, and I'm not that much in favor of a charter, but there is one, a way of bringing everyone under an umbrella and everyone understanding what Spark is and what it's meant to be. I should also mention on September the 29th, the next Spark Global meeting will take place in Berlin. And I would suggest, whatever you decide, that a representative attend that meeting to find out more about Spark and Spark Global. As far as more detailed information about Spark and Spark Stanford, it's all on Google. So if you Google Spark Stanford, you'll see everything, their successes. Lawrence and I also prepared a document, a PowerPoint presentation on the successes here in Australia, but I'm not going to show that right now. You can see that as well if that's what you want. So maybe I'll introduce Lawrence Marr now from Monash, and you can talk a little bit about your Spark experience there and give feedback.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
You need to be closer. Yeah, so Michael and I have known each other for a long time, and when we met, I was working at CSIRO in the manufacturing business unit, and most of my experience has been in the medical devices area, not in the drug discovery or drug development area. I have been involved in cellular therapies as a therapeutic vehicle as well. Worked with a lot of large companies. My first medical device experience was working on the first silicon hydrogel contact lenses. So in that sense, similar to Michael, we were able to go from discovery through to product launch, and working with a large multinational, even though you're not part of the organization, where it was a very close collaboration. So, you know, we met with manufacturing people, we met with their R&D department, we would their marketing people and the clinicians. So you get to see the whole pipeline or the whole pathway towards a market launch, and then post-market surveillance in that case, because it was a new class of product. So that was my first foray into medical devices, and that started in 1999. I'd always been a bit like Michael, very interested in seeing outcomes from research. And so right throughout my career, I've essentially worked with companies in one way or another the whole way. I really want to see an outcome from my own work, and I want to see outcomes from the people that I know and work with in the organisation. So I'm at Monash University. I worked at CSIRO for 16 years. And then I joined Monash as in a leadership role of the Monash Institute of Medical Engineering, which was a new venture at that time, 2025. Essentially, even earlier than Spark, if I would describe it in its sort of pathway, it brought clinicians and engineers and medical researchers together using clinical unmet need from the clinical side, and then pairing up with the right sort of researchers to help work towards medical device and diagnostic applications. And I did that role for about 4 years. I moved from that into a directorship of an ITTC, which is a ARC-funded training centre, and that is in the area of cell and tissue engineering technologies. So when I was at MIME, Michael and I had met several years ago when I was at CSIRO, but it became very clear that even though we were developing a pipeline of possible medical technologies, we got to, and we had seed funding of about 50K per project per annum. The idea goes forward a little way but it's still very, very far from de-risking a technology in any way whatsoever. It's the very first, if you like, experiments that give you a sense of maybe there might be some proof of concept going to happen at some point in the future. So we recognized there was a need to move things forward, take those projects, the good ones out of that bunch, and then move them forward down the translational pathway. And the Spark program is how we did that. Initially funded for 5 years. We ended up with a return on investment due to increased grant funding mostly of about 9. We ran a program of about 4 or 5 projects, and we did that probably 3 or 4 cohorts coming through that 5 or 6 years. Currently unfunded, but the leadership of Monash has changed a lot over the last couple of years. So we do find, and this is, I guess, a struggle working in a university context, for me anyway, and because we were a right across Monash program, not situated in individual faculty, although the engineering faculty and medical faculty were champions of MIME at the time. When there's constant churn in leadership, the message can get lost easily. It's hard to get traction. And everyone, when you sit down and talk to them, sees the benefits of a program like Spark, but it does require internal investment, and that's not always possible, and it's not always sitting with the vision of whatever the leadership that you're appealing to at the time. So that's one of the challenges, I think, is to keep, well, you've got to keep your own internal passion, I would say, to push through those boundaries. But, you know, the outcomes that you can produce in a program like that really do move a project forward to where a company, for example, is interested in potentially licensing, will sit down with you and they'll see some level of de-risking that means that they've got something that they could sell up, for example, to other leadership in their company. And I don't think I'll say any more than that, but just to thanks to Michael for encouraging me to come, and Pramila. Great to see you all, and hopefully you'll see the value of Spark and maybe move that as a mechanism going forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you. Yeah. So just to bring you up to date, what's happening now? As I said, next year we're starting with a new cohort at University of Sydney. We just completed a cohort of 6 projects. The biggest success that happened there a year ago was Michael Cassio, you might have heard about it, licensed for $275 million his new drug. We've had a number of license agreements. We have a number of close misses. But if you look at the input versus the output, it's astronomical. Same at Stanford, and a few papers were published on that. I was just at University of Adelaide, and I ran my bioinnovation entrepreneurship course there. It went very well, and that was with mainly actually postdocs and early career researchers. In starting Spark, UQ is interested in starting Spark once again. We've been back and forth with them, and hopefully WEHI will be interested in starting a Spark program or BIE or whatever you feel is best for you. Both Lawrence and I are very altruistic, as I said, in our attitude, and we really want to help you to be successful because we know WEHI is an absolutely fantastic institution and deserves to have great products and startups and licenses coming out. So I think I'd like to open for questions and discussion. Yeah. And if there are no questions, I will ask a question of you.
But I'll start with the.
And particularly
David.
Students, I'm interested in your questions.
And there is a bit of a mix between students, researchers, BD, venture people that really help entrepreneurs within the institute as well. So there's and drug discovery people. So you'll have questions from many different angles, I think.
Yeah, I'll come down.
Thanks, Guillaume. Yeah, David Siegel, I'm a BD lead here in our partnership and ventures team, which is why I was nodding and shaking my head and agreeing with you furiously. You talked about culture, and I guess my question is, culture is one of our challenges, but I think also incentives, misincentivization or perverse incentives. You talk about lecturing, writing grants and so on. That's where the incentives are. We need to incentivize people to say, right, well, that's important, that's critical, sure, but look, it's not disastrous if you do that and translate and do innovation. And the balancing act is that we need to be able to say, look, it's okay for you to, dial back the 70 hours you're doing on your academic research and give us 15 hours to do translation. That's a very big challenge, and I'm up for it. And, us in BD and Partnership and Ventures, we love this stuff, but it's not for everybody, obviously. But the challenge, I think, for us is to build an innovation mindset by putting those incentives in place to say it's okay to translate, and we're going to support you in that process. Right. Not just the BD side of things, but the career incentives as well for the investigators.
Yep, very good. First of all, I think WeHi has an advantage in being able to incentivize, because I assume, or maybe I don't know, most young PhD postdocs, et cetera, early career don't have to do teaching. And I think the teaching is a big problem. So if you're 24/7 in research, I think to incentivize you would be the thought of what is the value for you of spending your time trying to get your Nature and Science papers and win grants versus creating a startup? I think at some point, if you make that switch, then the organization can't get behind someone whose goal is to publish 10 papers a year for translation. It has to be a specific goal with a specific product in mind. Then it seems to me the Institute can get behind it, can give you a period of time, which I would recommend, I've said this to others, of expecting low productivity. You have to accept a period of low productivity, not only because of intellectual property, but also because, again, if you're directed towards a product, you're not going to be producing many papers. And that has to be accepted. There was a student, or Sparky at Stanford, who was working 5 years on a project that there was not a single publication. An excellent researcher. And she put everything into it. And yeah, I don't know if it failed or succeeded at the end, but it's that sort. That's a bit the other extreme. I don't expect you to spend 5 years with 0 publication. But to accept the fact there's going to be a reduction, to give that person the support they need, and if you see success, then take some of that 66 million and put it into where you think it's going to be successful. Don't just spread 100,000 in a project. You'll do nothing. Eventually, if we start seeing a return on investment, then the Institute, the government will want to fund you. But if they see no return on investment, which is the current situation, why would I want to give you money? Why would I believe in you? Why would I spend whatever it is, $1.5 million on a phase 1 trial and 10 or 20 million or 30 million? I had to ask for $20 million now, US, when I was at Stanford pitching a project in breast cancer. I felt a bit embarrassed. I never asked for 20 million at one go, US, which is 30 million here, which is half of your fund. If I asked you for 30 million, I don't know, are you running the fund? Whoever's running the fund, I ask you for 30 million, they'll think, what, are you out of your bloody mind? And as I say, in the real world, and I use that expression, you have to ask for 30, 40, 50. I know in a project that was presented in Germany that spent 75 million on a phase 2 trial, and it failed. And the person who ran it left. I don't think it's appropriate to laugh, but made it sound like it's not that's what happens. Failure's okay. And the institution has to understand failure's okay, which again is this Israeli culture, which I don't expect everyone to become like Israelis. I don't want you to become like any particular person, but who you are. But to find within the Australian context a way of starting to go for it. You got to go for it. Certainly if you believe in something. In my project, which went for 18 years, I don't know how I did it, But I believed the thing would work. I was even starting to have bad dreams about it, but that's the only way. Otherwise, it's just a game. I know when I got to UTS, their entire patent budget was a few $100,000. That's one patent. I mean, either you're playing games or you're real. You can't make believe you're going to do, and especially you guys are all in drug development or monoclonal antibodies, whatever you're doing. As Jenny knows, it's big money. Now, the other way, of course, is to partner. And part of Spark and Spark Global is to find those partnerships. And in fact, during COVID, which I didn't mention, when COVID started, I had an idea for using my chicken approach to COVID, which is using egg yolk antibody, which Jenny may know about. Or I don't know how much you know about egg yolk antibodies. But they're amazing antibodies because the mother hen wants to protect her baby hen from all infections. So the egg is loaded with these wonderful antibodies. So I called Stanford, and within a week, we were collaborating. Within a few months, we had $5 million raised. A few months. How long would that take if I wrote a grant? Same thing with other things I've done. You have to shortcut all of this. The system is not working in Australia for translation. And we have to find ways around that. And WeHi's should be one of the places that can do it. Because this is amazing. You sit here in this amazing place and everyone looks down. And I said that at UTS. Everyone looks down and fearful. You're in the most amazing place that you can possibly have. The best conditions. So just do it. And go for it. Then they'll want to get behind you. But I'm not going to want to get behind someone who I don't feel confident in. And in the end, what do VCs decide about in terms of investment? It's the person, it's the team. And if you show this strength, resilience, belief, I'm going to get through all obstacles, come hell or high water, I'll invest in you. But if you give me a look like, I don't know, maybe, yeah. You know how we speak as academics and how we write, this may do this and that may do that. I'm not going to want to invest in that, would you? Why should I invest in that? I can invest in IT and turn $1 over much quicker if I was a big investor. By the way, I'm not wealthy. People seem to get that impression. I did launch products and I did do things, but it didn't unfortunately make me a lot of money and made me decent money. So I'm not a wealthy person and I can't write a check to bail WeHi out if you have a debt. I'd love to, but the way to turn it around is to say, if you give me your money, I'm going to take it and make it work and to get the proper training for it. And if you're going to run Spark, yeah, you should at least meet twice a month, if not 4 times. They do it at Stanford. And Stanford's a busy place as well. They're also teaching. They have less students. They have 12,000, I think. What does Monash have, 60,000 students? It's crazy. Why are we training all these students anyway? So I think that's what has to change. And I'm trying to impart that to you. We also, through Spark, by the way, teach pitching. And another important thing I should mention, where Spark's playing a role, is validation. We need money also for validation. You can't rely on the results in a single lab, in a single institution. I don't care how good it is. I just had a case of a project that looked really good. It was repeated somewhere in Europe and did not repeat. And 10 years of work and a lot of millions of dollars went down the drain. I think things should be validated in early stage, and maybe part of the 6610 should be spent on validating key results in independent labs. I'll just point that out because of the problem of reproducibility. And I think Spark can play an important role there. And once you start doing that, you'll also gain confidence in what you're doing. I know even with simple things like cutting with restriction enzymes, I moved from one floor to another at Rockefeller many years ago. And what cut very well with whatever, Echo R1, in one lab did not cut in the next lab. So think about that too. And yeah, a lot about good laboratory practice that also we're not doing enough of. I don't know what the story is at WeHi of improving that. Spark also talks about that. So yeah, next question.
Well, maybe I'll ask the one online, which is from Cody Hall. following that response, how can young researchers demonstrate experience and progress on a translational program where we don't get the standard measures of success in Australia, presentations, publications, patents, etc.?
Right. So first of all, I'd relate to the side of patents. I think patents have to start counting as publications. I don't know what the story is at Melbourne, but I know at other universities, they don't even count as a single publication. I think they should be given weight. And if the university is spending a lot of money on a patent, give it credit, not that it's nothing for the researcher. In terms of presentations, we're starting to do that. There are conferences that are outside of the expertise you're in. There's one coming up in Taiwan called BioAsia. And in fact, I was just told by our Spark head in Taipei that there's money looking to be, that there's money for investment now in Taiwan. So I'd go to places like that. BioAsia, there's a BioInvestor Forum every year in San Francisco. And I would send people out into the world to present and pitch to VCs, to companies, to things that you don't normally pitch to, and start down that track and see how it goes. While at the same time, you want to maintain also your academic type of conference. But it's getting out in the world. And I'm sure people will want you to pitch and present and demonstrate your great experience. That's my answer.
So, Michael, I hope we don't look too uninspired. I think your comments resonate for a lot of people, particularly the highly motivating prospect of making, a real difference for patients in the real world, and particularly for clinician scientists. And I have some of those people, but not only for clinician scientists. I think it's a widely held sentiment. I think our problem is that, and perhaps this is reflected in the body language that you're picking up, is that we are just beaten into submission, really, by the current funding mechanisms in Australia, and spend probably 3 to 4 months of our year writing grants that, on the whole, we don't get, and then expected to turn around and do it all again in the following year. We don't have teaching responsibilities, as you pointed out, is a big problem in other environments, but some of us have major clinical responsibilities that we try to split with research responsibilities. I guess the whole thing is that every way you turn just looks like a series of obstacles, and as you say, it's vital that we break through that in Australia and find a different pathway. So I'm wondering how you mentioned there are presentations about Spark in Australia, which I think we should all look at. But has it worked in terms of getting these industry mentors, and how are they involved? Do they just give up their time altruistically? Do they stay involved? How does that work in the Australian context?
So in the Australian climate, it works very well. Quite the opposite. I've yet to find a mentor who said no. I've yet to find a mentor who gets excited about a project and doesn't mentor it to the best possible degree, be it here in Melbourne, be it in Sydney. You open the door to industry, they'll come in and they will be with you, and they'll do it for nothing. We do not pay for any mentors, and they simply love it. It started at Stanford with the same response. There's never been a problem finding mentors. Quite the contrary, people will be sometimes insulted if you don't ask them to do something. And I was saying at Stanford, they started with 20 in the room. They actually, when I went to a later meeting, there were about 100, 150 in the room. It became too much. And they all want to give. Everyone, and I worked in industry, and as probably Jenny knows, industry people are sometimes a lot more altruistic than I see in academia. People I worked with in industry really cared about doing good. It's not about the money. And one of the reasons Merck was so successful, to use their old cliche, is if you think of the patient first, you'll be a successful company. And then Merck went through the roof and became America's most successful company. So I think there's no problem finding mentors. There's no problem getting the type of help that you need, and they're going to want to be with you. And sometimes, in fact, they become too much for some of our researchers, and I have to intervene. But generally speaking, it's gone extremely well. And our rate of success, maybe Lawrence, in our last analysis, was about 40%, based on licenses, entry into clinical trials and startups. So we didn't do 60, but we're doing around 40. In Taiwan, where they run hundreds of projects through Spark, they're also in around the 40% success rate. So I don't know what the success rate is at WeHi, but you can expect a big increase from wherever you are. And it has to come, I think, not only from the really leading academics, but from the students. I feel like I need to jump up and down and get you excited. Yeah.
Probably in the morning. So Michael, you're talking a lot of the same talk that I feel. So I run a lot of we have an internal program that's been going for about 8 years. It started as the Impactful Innovator, but it's currently called the Innovation Program, but it has a much lower cohort. And the number one, probably, it's a much broader mandate because it's got the whole of the institute. And so we don't just get drug development companies, we get software companies, we get device or ideas and opportunities. And part of the thing is that cultural aspect that you talk about, the pressure and constraints of these people in the facilities, the labs, they have other criteria. Whereas I'm going, well, this is an opportunity for you to take it to that next level. And the big piece for me right now is that mentorship aspect. I talked to a former leader at the Spahn Center at MIT and said they had a mentorship program, which was, he said that was the most valuable thing. And part of the issue there is that he said the one thing that he had to make sure with the people who he introduced the mentors is that they didn't waste their time.
Yes.
And I suppose part of the issue here is to make sure that is how do we change that cultural dynamic so that I suppose across the organization, and there's lots of pressures that people are beating down the door to come. We've got lots of right mixes and ingredients. We've had entrepreneur scientists, we've got the fund, we've got a program. We have a sort of amorphous environment where we will push parties to the right initiative, whether it's a Siron program, whether it's the MAP program at Melbourne, whether it's our own program. There's the Jumar facility that runs their program. So it really is about finding the right mix that gets that team excited. But internally, I'm still trying to solve that thing of just getting the excitement levels up about why we do this, which is really about the translation, the development of the individual, which may or may not become a company, which may be a license of technology, which actually may be the development of the talent to go and work for industry. So have you got a secret sauce there?
Let me see. Look, I'm not sure I'm answering your question. In my experience of Spark, at Stanford, at UTS, or wherever, once you start going, it gains a momentum. And it's this constant meeting. It's constantly getting together. I know at Melbourne, when we were getting together, we became like a family. And Pramila shaking her head. We became friends. We're all in it together. And if anyone succeeded or got a grant, we were happy for them. It's that feeling that we're a family, because in the normal, we hardly talk to each other in academia. We often don't even know what the person down the hall is doing. When we get together constantly, when we celebrate each other's successes, when we know what everyone is trying to achieve and we work together for that achievement, and when we have that feeling, I don't care who succeeds in which institution and which lab, but any success we're going to really build on, we're going to support, we're going to celebrate. I think that's what we need internally. It's not enough for tech transfer people at UTS to assemble everyone once every 6 months and teach about IP. It's meaningless. It has to be in your blood and experiential and exciting. And I think that's what we were achieving at Melbourne when Pramila was there. They were looking forward to the meetings. And for example, when someone working on flu needed to do a trial, I found a contact for them in the States at St. Jude. And that made it possible for that project to go forward. They didn't know what to do. They didn't have funding for it. I got someone to do it for nothing. For nothing. An experiment that would have been worth hundreds of thousands of dollars that you spend ages getting a grant for. I think it's this, there are different ways of working that speed everything up. And when I walked during the H5N1 flu epidemic, and I walked into a group in Sweden to ask them to collaborate with me on the project, they not only agreed to collaborate, they agreed to fund it. So it's opening these new ways of doing things. We can't rely on the old system. We have to break through it. And we have to do it together. You can't sit in your own lab anymore and stare down your microscope and expect things to happen, even if you have a Nature paper. It's just the change that I think has to come about. Yeah.
All right, thank you. I think it's time for us to conclude the conversation, but it was great to have your thoughts and share your experience. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.